The Imperatrix. You're listening to the Mistress Code. I'm Racy Wild. There is a particular kind of dominant woman whose existence many men have encountered without ever understanding her. She is not a pro-dom, though men often mistake her for one when they notice she does not give her attention, time, or erotic authority away cheaply. She is not simply a lifestyle domina, though she lives femdom as naturally as breathing. Her dominance is not confined to the bedroom or a relationship, nor is it a recreational identity that she suspends when she goes to work or meets friends. Her femdom is structural, an organizing principle of her life, a worldview, an ethic, an aesthetic woven into the way she thinks, chooses, creates, and governs her existence. She builds her life the way some people build businesses or political careers, through networks, alliances, influence, creative production, and a sustained vision of a world she is bringing into being. And the men who wish to be a part of that world must understand that their role is not to be indulged, but to contribute. This woman is what I call the Imperatrix, the domina whose erotic authority and life structure are inseparable, whose sovereignty extends beyond intimacy and into the architecture of her life. I'm using the term Imperatrix because we don't have a word that describes her precisely. Pro-dom suggests a commercial exchange. Lifestyle domina suggests a private erotic orientation, but neither conveys the women I am describing. Women like myself, who are not selling domination nor privately containing it. Their femdom is a mode of governance. They preside over a personal domain defined not by territory, but by vision, by influence, by relational design, and by the allegiance of men who recognize her female authority. The Latin word imperium refers to the scope of one's power, the recognized authority to direct the world immediately around you, political, financial, social, and domestic. The feminine form, Imperatrix, carries this meaning. It captures the woman whose world is not a stage set for male fantasy, but a living system sustained by the men who understand how to belong within it. To understand why an Imperatrix requires active contribution from submissives rather than just obedience, we must first understand the historical lineage she inherits. Feminism, king culture, and popular media have all failed to articulate this lineage clearly. She is taboo because she threatens both the male superiority and female passivity. If anything, she belongs to the lineage patriarchy tried hardest to erase. In medieval courtly literature, the lady was not a romantic damsel, but the axis around which masculine identity was refined. Knights pledged themselves to her not to win her heart, but to cultivate virtues under her judgment. Her recognition shaped their honor, and her favor was a form of political and social currency. Her presence confirmed legitimacy on the men who served her. As Roger Bose demonstrates, this structure was not a precursor to modern romance, but a model of female authority that emerged organically within a patriarchal society because it was desired. It fulfilled a cultural need. The lady did not need rescuing. She required loyalty, discipline, and service. The same dynamics appear in the Renaissance, where courtesans were neither passive decorations nor sentimental heroines, but highly strategic women who wielded erotic intelligence to secure resources, patronage, protection, and influence. Veronica Franco, Tulia de Aragona, and Imperia Connati did not rise through erotic surrender. They rose through networks of men whose admiration, desire, and loyalty became instruments of their advancement. These women were entrepreneurs in eras that forbade women from owning property or entering into commerce. They survived and often thrived through social mastery, intellectual brilliance, and the capacity to turn male privilege into female strength. Betsy Priolo's Seductress shows that these women were vilified precisely because they transcended the boundaries assigned to their sex. They were called immoral, corrupt, deceitful, and dangerous, not because they harmed men, but because they refused the social script of feminine dependence. In the centuries that followed, this entire lineage of female strategy was progressively rewritten through the rise of sentimental fiction, Victorian domestic ideology, and later the industrialization of romance. The cultural shift from alliance to affection, what scholars describe as the triumph of compassionate marriage, did not reflect women's historical behavior, but men's growing need to domesticate female ambition into emotional dependency. Romantic love became the ideological container through which female agency could be neutralized. The self-determining lady was replaced by the moral, purified angel in the house, a figure whose virtue lay in self-sacrifice, passivity, and the relentless emotional service of men. Even literature that appeared to champion female integrity, such as Samuel Richardson's Pamela from 1740, ultimately rewarded strategic allegiance only when it culminated in chastity and submission to male authority. Heroic female cunning was allowed, but only if it led to docility. The result was a cultural erasure in which women's historical use of men as allies, patrons, protectors, and instruments of advancement was recast as manipulation or immorality, while emotional dependence was elevated as the sole legitimate expression of femininity. By the 20th century, media such as Disney distilled these narratives into a global myth. The woman's arc became a love story. Her fulfillment is a romantic union, and her power lies in being chosen. Men absorbed these fictions as deeply as women did, and so when they meet a dominant woman who orientates herself towards sovereignty rather than romance, they misinterpret her stance as emotional avoidance or even pathology, rather than a continuation of her historical lineage. The women who resemble today's dominant women were never defined by romance or domestic longing. They operated in the margins where formal power excluded them, yet they shaped culture, politics, and erotic life through influence, allegiance, and strategic relationships with men. Their power was not inherited but constructed. built through networks, devotion, and the intelligent use of resources in worlds designed to deny them agency. And this is the lineage that survives in modern femdom, not the sentimental myths that later obscured it. The Imperatrix is not a commercial service provider, nor a domestic romantic partner. She is the inheritor of 1,000 years of women who built empires without territory, who governed through influence rather than law, who leveraged male allegiance not for affection, but for strength, protection, and self-directed expansion. Her Femdom is not an aesthetic. It is a political structure. Understanding this lineage is essential because it clarifies why the Imperatrix requires more than a man's fantasy, desire, or love. Men often approach dominant women offering their obedience as though it were a rare gem. They imagine that the gift of their body, their arousal, or their willingness to be used should be enough to secure a place at her feet. But in truth, desire is cheap. Every man has desire. Every man has a body. Every man wants to be controlled, undone, or transformed. There is nothing special in this. An Imperatrix does not lack access to male desire. She lacks nothing at all. What she selects are men who can materially and structurally support the architecture of her life. Men sometimes balk at the idea that they should contribute resources, their financial, intellectual, social, or logistical, to a dominant woman. They call it exploitation, manipulation, gold digging, or arrogance. Yet their discomfort reveals a profound historical amnesia. For most of human history, women had no legal ability to accumulate wealth, land, or institutional power of their own, or secure social influence independently. The only means of advancement available were alliances with men who possessed those resources. What men call opportunism was, for generations of women, survival. And for dominant women, it was not only survival but strategy. The instinct to gather allies, to orchestrate networks, to cultivate devotion, and to convert male privilege into female freedom is not greed. It was refined out of necessity. It is ancestral intelligence. It is genetic culture. It is ironic that modern men expect financial equality from women as though women have enjoyed equal economic power for millennia. And you can see that men are now trying to use feminism to punish women. The demand for 50-50 makes sense only to those who imagine history began in 1975. It ignores the fact that men have benefited from economic autonomy for thousands of years, while women developed the entrepreneurial intelligence required to thrive without it. The Imperatrix descends from women who had to build empires from nothing but charisma, intellect, erotic brilliance, and the redirection of male resources. These women mastered the art of empire building long before they were permitted to legally own anything at all. This is why approaching an Imperatrix with nothing but sexual desire is inadequate. To serve her is to strengthen her world. To belong to her is to amplify her influence. Contribution is not an optional courtesy, but is the definition of relevance. The man who contributes becomes part of her sovereignty. The man who contributes nothing remains external, noticed perhaps, but non-essential. There is no moral judgment in this. It is simply the logic of world building. The Imperatrix is not collecting lovers. She is building an imperium, and her submissives are part of the material from which it is made. This distinction also clarifies why the Imperatrix is fundamentally different from prodoms, whom she is often confused with. A prodom sells her skill, presence, and erotic labor in a professional setting. This is legitimate work and deserves respect. Yet the prodom's authority is bounded by the economic contract. The Imperatrix, by contrast, is not selling anything. She is not offering sessions. She is not providing experiences. She is not being rented, hired, or scheduled. Her dominance is not episodic. It is systemic. Those who enter her domain are not customers or clients, but contributors and collaborators within an existing system of female authority. Nor is she simply a lifestyle domina. A lifestyle domina governs the erotic and emotional sphere. The Imperatrix governs across spheres. Her authority flows through social, creative, intellectual, professional, and philosophical life. Her submissives are not chosen solely for professional compatibility or chemistry, but for structural alignment. She selects men in the way effective leaders select advisors, for competence, loyalty, reliability, strategic value, and the ability to enhance her life rather than consume it. This distinction is not abstract theory. It is how I live my femdom. The men around me know they are not just toys to be played with. They are part of my infrastructure. One might bring social competency and connections that open new opportunities for me to network and further my influence. Another might offer professional expertise that strengthens my intellectual and entrepreneurial projects. Others might contribute to the operational labor of my femdom that would otherwise cost me time and money, driving, coordinating logistics, scouting locations, and building equipment. Some might offer aesthetic value, their bodies becoming the canvas I use to refine my craft and expand my photo archive. And yes, some might financially tribute so I can focus on femdom and not get sidetracked by vanilla obligations. All this orchestration is the natural behavior of a woman who understands her authority as generative, not consumptive. This is how an Imperatrix becomes expansive. It also explains why romantic expectations with femdom derail so many men who pursue dominant women. Romance centers the man as the emotional reward, the climax of the story, and the one who fills a woman's heart. But the Imperatrix story does not end with a man. It doesn't even begin with one either. Her story is the construction of her life, and the men in her world are valued by their capacities to support that construction. When a man understands this, something remarkable happens. His submission becomes purposeful. He stops offering himself and starts offering his usefulness. He stops asking what he can receive and begins asking what he can build. And it is from this contribution that affection grows. The more a man strengthens her world, the more emotionally significant he becomes to her. It is not transactional, but a relational alignment. The Imperatrix forms bonds with men who reinforce her sovereignty. She does not bond because she is rescued. She does so because she is recognized for her power and authority. She develops devotion to the men who help her climb, who make her life more expansive, who honor her orientation by contributing rather than consuming. When men talk about wanting to serve powerful women, this is the service they mean without yet knowing about it. They want to be a part of something larger than themselves. They want their obedience to matter. They want their devotion to have consequences. And in the imperium of a dominant woman, it does. The ethic I want men to understand is that if you wish to serve an imperatrix, you must contribute to her world. You must be a resource, not a cost to her. You must amplify and not drain. You must bring something that allows her authority to manifest more fully. It could be intelligence, social positioning, craftsmanship, logistics, finance, artistry, erotic brilliance, or a way of thinking that strengthens her. But it must be something, actual value, not fantasy, not words, and not longing. If you approach a dominant woman expecting her to pour energy, eroticism, or mentorship into you, while you offer nothing but desire, do not resent her disinterest. Desire alone will not grant you access. She does not exist to complete your fantasy. She exists to build her empire, and the men who rise in her world are those who help build it with her.